Welcome to the Inside Pod number 5. We are halfway to 10. How about that? Yep, it is now the morning after when we recorded this show, 2021 season preview. So I am injecting my veins with rounds and rounds of coffee. Podcasting at 12:30 a.m. It's sort of a trip. At least at 41 years old. But that's cool. We got it done. It's a good show. It's a fun show. Might ruffle a few feathers, but that's okay too. So we hope you enjoy it. Looking really forward to rounding this corner here in March and seeing the season finally get underway here at the 1st of April. So we will be back at you again in April with more content when the season is in full swing. But for now, it's the Inside Pod number 5 with Mike and Scotty. But first, as always, let's rock. Hello again, BDL. It is Inside Pod number 5. Mike, we are back for number 5, show number 5. Oh my gosh. We made it through, well, not through 5 yet. We're just starting 5, but we're about to make it through 5. So that counts for something. What's going on, bro?
We are the 5-time podcast champions? How many BDL podcasts have made it this far? What, 3 or 4 tops?
Let's see. Of course, TMO. Stuck in the Ivy technically was a web show, a TV show, but it probably falls. That's 2. The sure. Pony Express ran for about 50 episodes.
Yes, that's 3. Did the show that Craig did with a bunch of us, what was it called, Breaking Balls? Did that get through 5 episodes?
Breaking Balls, that might have knocked on the door of 5 episodes. It had a short run, but it was a very good show.
Joe's show lasted about 5 seconds. That one doesn't count.
That's just the Stinger ran for at least a few. It might have been a half a dozen, so it probably cleared it. I'd have to go back and look. And then there was the Full Count with Mark and Brent. Is that right?
That sounds familiar. How many episodes did they get through?
I don't think they got through many. I don't think they got through many.
They got through 6.
Okay. Well, so you've got a handful of shows that make it that far. We're on the low end.
We're knocking on the door right now to knock out to knock out their show. That's not bad.
Okay, well, guys, listen. We're back today for the season preview show for 2021. So, such a big show that we had to call in some extra backup, some extra help. So we have 2 guests for you on this show here with us. You're going to hear from Joe of the Amish Brotherhood. He's going to be here, as well as Chris of the Beers, all together on the same show with, of course, myself, Mike, you as well. It might get a little chaotic. We might not all make it out alive or still in the league. Kind of a combustible group, maybe, to all get together on the same show. But here we are, and we're gonna roll the dice. But no, it's going to be a good time, and I'm really looking forward to getting rolling here in just a few minutes.
It'll certainly be a fun show. And Scotty, I think it's important for us to be honest with our listeners on why we have 2 guests. The original plan was to just have Joe as our only guest. But then our major advertisers just stepped in and said, no, this can't be the primary guest for a show that we put this kind of advertising money into. So we had to go in and really bring in a star guest. And we couldn't find one of those, so we got Chris. So this is basically where we are.
Yes, and that major sponsor was the Fresca line of soft drinks.
Yeah, they pumped big money into this podcast. Big money.
Maybe if we're lucky, if we make it to through a half a dozen shows, we can land Zima.
You ain't kidding. I'm drinking Diet Pepsi right now, so maybe they'll sponsor us. I don't know. Maybe they'll
I'm,
toss
just,
us a six pack.
I'm sticking to water, but
Mm.
we're recording this show later than usual in the day. I should actually have maybe a Coke or even some coffee for my old ass to make it through this
Yeah,
show awake.
not a
But
bad idea.
yeah, not a bad idea. But in any case, I don't want to waste any time. We've got a lot of ground to cover today, so let's throw it on to the full collective tonight for the 2021 BDL season preview. Okay, guys, we are here for the 2021 preseason power rankings, preseason projections show for the Inside Pod for the Black Diamond League. We are about 37 minutes past due here to get things rolling. That is due to one of our guests, Mr. Joe of the Amish Brotherhood. Been a long time since we've got to chat, Joe, so hello, but fuck you.
Gentlemen, it is great to have the Amish back on the BDL airwaves. Been wanting to say that for about 10 years. I think that was the last time you had me on.
It might have been. And now that we're aware that when you try to connect to one of our podcasts, you're doing so using a Commodore 64, I'm wondering if this will be your last appearance as well.
Yep, I think it's going to be another 10 years, Joe.
Well, that may be when I'm a contender again.
Someone's optimistic.
We're going to take a look at that. Also on the line, Chris of the Beers, former BDL champion, joining us for the season preview show. We're glad to have you, Chris, as well. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here. I think we were talking a little bit before about how you forgot that I was a BDL champion, but at least you're reminded of that now. Surprised that you put me and Joe on the same show, so we'll see how that goes. If we had thought this out, maybe we would have put somebody on from the West. So we had one from each division. But let's go with it.
Yeah, we don't put that much thought into these things.
Really
we just wing it. There's no research. We just kind of hit record and whatever happens. It's magic. It's just how we make magic here on the inside.
It's just what we do, Scotty. This is the Champions Roundtable plus Joe show.
Well, let's be honest. I am the favorite BDL manager, despite that bullshit tournament that made Mike the winner. I still say that was fucking bullshit, but anyway.
Thanks for the buy in the final again, buddy. Damn right.
Oh gosh, yeah, we've not gotten to stretch our legs, or I haven't, and do a preseason show on BDL Radio in quite a while. I don't remember the last one, so I'm really looking forward to this, and I think there are some interesting storylines this year and some surprises in terms of what teams should be expected to perform well, and what teams are. Kind of not in the best of places, maybe than what we originally thought. But anyway, let's get rolling. By the way, Mike, our legal department did request that I read this one notice before we get going. So we're going to go through the divisions one by one, ACL to PCL, then look at the overall projections. We've developed a ranking system here. It's pretty simple, but it goes like this. So the Inside Pod preseason PowerScore is influenced primarily by CBS preseason projections for every player on every BDL roster. In some instances, plus and minus points were calculated into a club score to account for players that remain unsigned, roster size dynamics prior to spring roster cuts, and other situational factors like that. relative to this point in the spring, we feel it's the most objective projection possible for every team when analyzing all possible factors. So if you disagree vehemently with your score, if you're listening to this, know that it is largely the fault of the CBS fantasy sports team. So write to CBS and complain, not to Mike and Scotty. So that's the statement.
I feel like we should speed that up, so it just sounds like one of those disclaimer reads,
Like a Micro Machines commercial.
Exactly.
Yes, I'm old enough to understand and deliver that reference.
And I'm too old to remember it.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that.
I guess I hit that 90s sweet spot, or maybe that was late 80s. I don't remember. Anyway. Okay. Where should we start? We discussed earlier about just omitting the South Division preview, but I think we might try to go ahead with it unless anyone has any objections. It's really just a formality since the Generals exist in that division, but in the interest of making sure everything is covered properly, maybe we should go ahead. So I'm going to give you the preseason power ranking, the power score for each team in the South Division based on the CBS projections. And are you ready to go? ACL South.
Let's do it.
Let's go.
All right. Do you want to go 4-1 or 1-4?
Let's go 4-1 so you can brag when we get to the top, Scott.
Okay. Coming in at number 4 with a power score number of 13.1. And by the way, the lower your score, the better. Okay. 13.1.
Sorry.
What's that?
Please continue.
He's derailing the show already, Scotty. All right.
We'll edit that out.
No, we edit nothing around here.
We don't have that, that type of resources on this program. It's live to tape. We're live to tape, everybody.
All right, number 4, the Memphis Chicks with a power score of 13.1. Number 3, the Vipers, power score of 10.9. Number 2, the Wallabies, power score of 7.1. And number 1 in the South Division for 2021, the Generals with a power score of 6.6. So, any surprises?
That sounds about right. You could probably flip Gotham and Portsmouth if you wanted to, and honestly, the gap there is. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think you could. I think the gap between 1 and 2 is infinitely small, and the gap between 3 and 4 is infinitely small. So, if you want to flip those teams, I don't have a real issue with it.
I am going to flip them.
Chris, we did not invite you onto this show to create artificial controversy. That is unnecessary.
That's Joe.
That was Joe that said that.
My bad.
Jesus.
He's not the best host in the business for nothing, gentlemen. Go ahead, Joe.
All right.
Joe.
Okay, Joe, explain yourself.
Oh, well, I think Brent's lineup is better. It's really close. I just like it more. And I like his pitching. Well, everyone's going to have a better team than mine right now. But we're talking about the South, right? So I think, look, I ranked Brent first. Really close. I think, I want to say you'll both be in the playoffs, but you won't both be in the playoffs. And I'm going to stick with my gut. I thought Brent had a better team last year, if you recall, when I did that other show. And I think he's gonna take this division. You can cut me off now.
I'm going to disagree. I got to go with the Generals on this one. I mean, I think Brent has a lot of good pieces out there, but I actually think he lags behind Scotty in the offensive categories kind of pretty significantly. I actually think if I look at it on paper, the Wallabies might have the third best offense in that division. Now, they have the best pitching, but I think there's going to need to be some moves made throughout the season, not only on the offensive side, but as we look at pitching this year, I think a lot of things are going to be up in the air. So sure, if all of his starters do what they're projected to do, I think he's got a great shot at that. I'm just questioning kind of starting pitching in general this year, kind of leaning more towards offense that I think is really going to drive, the division winners and who I think will make it to the playoffs. And, I got to give that one to Scotty as much as it hurts.
Just to provide a little bit of context there and run through some numbers. The Wallabies rank 5th in overall projected average, 9th in home runs, 12th in runs, and 10th in both RBI and stolen bases.
Yeah, so I would even give the edge to the Vipers in terms of just purely offensive stats. I mean, like you said, things are going to change. Players are going to get cut, players are going to get added. And I think that's where it's also going to come down to Brent needing to put in the time to really work that waiver wire. And then I think he's got a chance to challenge Scotty.
Well, you're in Denver, and I think maybe you're high right now. I think I don't give a shit about CBS projections. I think Brent's lineup is as good or better than Scotty's, certainly better than Michael's. And yeah, he's got a better pitching staff. I think Brent takes it.
Yeah.
I will admit,
I don't even have a beer in me yet.
I will admit, in calculating the projections, that number 1 and number 2 in the South, it was a little closer than I anticipated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really shocked. Yeah, I'm not really shocked. Like in 2019, there's a 2-game gap between you guys. I think last year,
something like that.
I think last year was basically a coin toss. If you look at rosters, like for me, this is your classic coin toss, Division 1-2, and the problem just becomes: is the second team going to be better than the third team in the East? That's just a question.
Yeah. I will give Chris this prop. He brought up a great point. Will Brent be active enough to make the difference? And I think that will be the difference. He has to be on. He has to make the moves that are necessary. Yep. Scotty will live on the boards. So we'll see.
Just another note here, and we'll let this kind of illustrate itself as we go down through the divisions. But the South has one of, I'm trying to eyeball that right now, one of, if not the largest gaps from first to fourth in the whole league. The first place team, projected team, the Generals with the PowerScore 6.6, and the Chicks with a 13.1. That's one of, if not the widest margins in a division in the BDL this year.
Yeah,
and I would have.
Surprising.
I was going to say that's not surprising. I would have expected that, but I mean, listen, I think that gap just shows that you have the teams that are in it, and then the teams that are, rebuilding and not going for it. I think it's going to be interesting to see the ones that are more grouped together, if there are, because that kind of tells you that it might be harder to figure out the identity of your team. But I think having that gap shows the teams that are in it and the teams that are still working to rebuild, like the Chicks.
Anybody have any opinions on, Zach has made a lot of noise about, my team sucks right now, but we have some good pieces in place. It's just a matter of time before, things start to happen, that momentum picks up and I can flip a switch. Do you see that as being an accurate portrayal of the situation for the Chicks, or?
Nope. Nope. Anyone else got a different opinion on that?
He's a few years out.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. I have a bit of a different opinion. I mean, I think it's not going to be a short-term answer, but I mean, I don't think he necessarily inherited a team that had, all the pieces that were ready to go here. When you scroll through his minor league teams, I mean, he's got the pieces. I think really what he just needs to bet on is that some of these young major leaguers make that next step, and then he's going to have to decide on, what the right time is to sell out some of these minor league pieces, because we haven't seen too many teams be successful with, having a whole bunch of high-end prospects and then having them all come up and then the team competes, right? You see it more that you kind of establish that nice base of, young major leaguers, and then you trade away these pieces. But, I still think that's 2, maybe even 3 years away. But, he's got a lot of nice components. He just needs them to hit.
Yeah.
I like. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So I think Zach's team reminds me a lot of Johnny's team from a few years ago. Only Zach has a bunch of pitching coming up in the minors. He's got a couple of nice pieces that are in the majors right now. Johnny for quite a few years, had an unbelievable lineup. And what always derailed him was they had no pitching. So I think if Zach follows that blueprint, but can bring pitching to the table that Johnny never had, I think he can make some noise. It's going to be a couple of years, but like Chris said, there's a lot of pieces coming up. Looks good.
Yeah, not to ignore the Vipers in this division. I mean, I think that's a team that could compete. Again, I think it's going to come down to the work that needs to be out there, and they could definitely challenge for that number 2 spot in the South. I think the challenge is going to be, we may see 2 wild card teams come out of the East in that conference, but so the second place might not mean as much in the South, but I could see the Wallabies and the Vipers kind of jockeying for that position again, kind of depending on where the pitching lies out.
Yeah, the Vipers. The Vipers is a club really that it seems to be in a state of transition, and I'm not sure. Um, I know they've done some work, to shore some things up. Fairly active recently. Maybe a small identity crisis in terms of the direction of the club and what they're building toward. I'm just looking at just raw numbers here, so it might not paint a full picture. But this year, the projections for the Vipers stand at they're in the bottom 4 in the league in five categories: average, stolen bases, ERA, strikeouts, and WHIP. But in the top, let's see, in the top 8 in 4 categories: home runs, runs, RBI, and saves. So strengthening some areas, lagging behind in others, and at some point, they're going to have to, the club's going to have to meet in the middle to get out of that, pit of mediocrity that it's in. But
Yeah. Well, a lot of those categories too are, I think, the ones that are going to be the wild cards, right? I mean, sure, outside of maybe stolen bases or strikeouts, as you mentioned, being more of a counting stat, but average ERA and WHIP. I mean, I would sit here and love to say that each of us can project how our teams are actually going to do in those buckets, right? But those are probably the hardest ones to predict.
Yeah.
So I think if a couple of those categories flip for them, that's where they're going to be in a good shot, because they do have kind of some of those, the counting stats as opposed to the average stats.
I think this also speaks to how hard it is in this league to take over a bad team and turn it into a good one. Like outside of Matt, we haven't had a lot of guys that have come into this league and instantly been able to figure this league out. I know it took me a number of years to figure out what I was doing. And to be honest, we put clubs in a really tough spot when they take over a bad team in a division with 2 really good teams to put together a plan to kind of rebuild or reload that roster. It is a really, really hard thing to do.
absolutely, I agree 100%. All right, if there are no more comments on the South, we'll move right along in the ACL to the the Dynamite East Division. Always a gauntlet of a division. Nothing has changed this year. Still the same, top to bottom. Just a stellar group of owners, clubs, and man, that race at the top is going to be potentially one for the ages. So we'll go again from number 4 to number 1. In the East for the PowerScores at number 4, and he might be a little surprised by this, maybe not. The Double Downs at number 4 with a 9.5 score. Fair amount of separation between 3 and 4. Up to number 3, the Damage with a 6.9. And then it gets really interesting. Maybe not too much of a surprise, but at number 2 in the East, the Cardinals, former BDL champions, obviously, 4.9 score, with the Rockets, the defending champions, coming in at number 1 with a 4.5 score in the East. So 1, 2, 3, 4, Rockets, Cardinals, Damage, Double Downs. Number 1 and number 2, the Rockets and the Cardinals, separated by very little in the ranking system. Very close. Just a couple skips down, you have the Damage, and then a few notches below there, the Double Downs.
That surprises me a little bit that I'm ahead of Carolina. I think I have a little more kind of top end elite talent than he does. He probably has a little more depth of talent than I do. Grand scheme of things, these are two of the better teams in the league. I hate referring to my own team like that, but certainly I would put us both in the top six or so clubs in the league, uh, probably rather safely. And to be honest, I think this is a lot like the South. This is really coin toss for me. Like if his team wins, I wouldn't be surprised. If my team wins, I wouldn't be surprised. This
So
is your classic coin toss.
yeah, and just to add to that point, Mike, I'm scanning my sheet right now. The Cardinals and the Rockets are two of the only three teams in the league this year that are projected to be in the top 10, somewhere in the top 10 in every single scoring category. The Rockets, the Cardinals, and we'll get to the Bears later. They're also on that list.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Um, they are projected to be in the top 10 in every single category. The Rockets, at the low end, they're sitting at number 9 at projected average right now, number 8 in Ks. At the high end, first in stolen bases, second in ERA and saves. The Cardinals, at the high end, first in runs, second in RBI, third in average and stolen bases, and at the low end, um, number 8 ERA and wins, number 9 in saves. So it's a very close score, very close
Yeah,
score. And talking about a coin flip there in the South, I think it applies um, much more so in the East.
Joe, you want to jump in?
Yeah, well, it's painful for me to jump in on this one because I feel like I played a big part in making both of those teams really good through some really shitty trades. They're both fantastic teams. They're both going to be probably the top 2 title favorites. I have a third that is on this phone call. But I think Mike's got the best team in the league. I think Matt is really close, and I hate you both.
thanks, buddy.
Yeah, from my perspective, I mean, listen, I think this being one of the tighter top to bottom divisions, I think we've always known that. We've seen that over the last couple of years. I mean, I know Scotty, when you kicked it off, you said that not much has changed here, and I actually would disagree on one point. I think the Double Downs have taken a step back and a purposeful step back. I mean, if I was Kevin and I looked at kind of absolutely the top 2 teams in this league, in this division, I'm sorry, the top 2 teams in some of the top 2 teams in this league are in this division, and I think just knowing that, that makes it a challenge to really project out how you need your season to go. Obviously the damage always being a threat, and Kevin just having to play in this league, and I think Kevin's always there, right? I mean that's a a huge feather in
Yeah.
his cap, but I think taking the opportunity to maybe pull in some pieces, get rid of some of his older talent, and unfortunately I think he's just going to have to bet on the Rockets and the Cardinals hitting a snag down the road, right? And I think you know not that I foresee that necessarily for the Rockets or the Cardinals, but I think that's probably the right approach to take. Until maybe we realign some divisions and Kevin's going to be a much 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 stronger team, right? So, sometimes you just kind of have to take the cues from what's going on around you and mold your
Mhm.
team to that. And I think that's the sign of a strong manager here, knowing that this probably isn't his year. Make some trades, get some younger, acquire some pieces, and just see what you can do to kind of let these 2 teams duke it out and find the right time for yourself to come in. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
I absolutely see the Rockets and the Cardinals battling for that first. I think the damage is a tick behind those teams. I mean, I think offensively they're there, but I think their pitching staff right now kind of lags behind. So if
Oh
Bill
yeah.
can make
Yeah.
make some of those moves, then he's probably getting closer to there. But I still foresee in my projections three of these teams making the playoffs here. And like I said, I would expect that to be Rockets, Cardinals, and damage in that order.
Yeah, and the projections bear that out. What you were saying about the damage, and especially on the pitching end, they actually rank number 2 in the league in WHIP based on the projection. But
they don't have the volume. That's why.
No. The other four, they're almost off the board in terms of playoff contention. Number 14 in wins, 14 in wins for the Damage. That's
That
unheard
never
of.
happens. Yeah.
Number 12 in saves, 11 ERA, and barely inside of the top 10 at number 9 in strikeouts. Their offense looks great as usual. They're 1, 2, 3, 4 home runs, stolen bases, RBI, and runs, and they have a fairly low average for a playoff contender with a number 11 ranking. But it's kind of an odd year, odd projection for NorCal. And I think they're on that bubble, and they're likely to be a playoff team, but it's kind of a hard picture to get a full view of.
Yeah, NorCal also has a very a deep hitting bench, which they're not going to be able to roster, and
Sure.
that might that may be skewing some of these numbers as well. When we look at these, because I know a few of the clubs, I know mine's one of them, we're actually legal currently. So when we look at our stats, these are what our projections are going to look like on April 1st with a couple of these other clubs. Like I think NorCal right now has an 8-man hitting bench. He's probably going to end up with 2 or 3 guys on that bench. So things are going to change a little bit come April 1st. As the point that Chris mentioned on Kevin, he's in a really tricky spot because with most divisions, when teams are going for it, they tend to sell out to go for it for a real short run. Like they'll take all their prospects and they'll sell them all, and they'll go on a 2 or 3 year run. They'll rebuild. The way that I build my team, I don't do that. I don't think Matt's going to be the type that does that, and Bill has been good, forever. So it's kind of hard to time a roster rebuild in a division like that because you don't know when those teams are going to take steps back, which is kind of different than, say, the South, where a team like Scotty's, he is clearly going for it this year. And you can safely guess that in 2 years, his team probably isn't going to be as good as it is right now. It's probably a pretty safe guess. In the East, if you ask me how good is Carolina going to be in 2 years, I just assume they're going to be as good as they are now. And historically, my teams are usually pretty good. So it's a tough thing to be in our division. It really is. Like for me, it's clearly the best division in the league and has been for a number of years. And it's just really hard to know how to time your roster when the clubs ahead of you don't make moves that are kind of all-out moves for this year.
Wasn't this supposed to be the year Bill took a step back?
We've been saying that for about 10 years. And to be honest, I didn't buy it 10 years ago. I don't buy it now. I think Bill's team is just as good as, the vast majority of the good teams in this league. I never assume they're not going to win this division just because I play them 3 times a year every year. And I'm not sure what my record was 2 years ago, but I'm going to assume it was about 500 because it always is against him. So to be honest, if he won this division, I would be a little surprised just because it means he finished ahead of both me and Matt, but I wouldn't be shocked at all.
Well,
go ahead, Joe. I didn't mean to discount the Damage when I was heaping high praise on the Rockets and Cardinals. Bill's team can beat either of your teams on any given week, as he has shown, like you said, for the last 10 years. So he is certainly going to be in the running. I don't think that his short pitching staff is going to be an issue as we progress through the season. I think he's going to make moves. He is a very savvy trader, as he's shown. So he'll be there.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing that these ranks don't really show, right? I mean, you have to factor in that ownership, into that, right? To see if they're going to make those moves, if they're going to be there to adjust it. So,
right.
And from my perspective, I would never say that the Damage have taken a step back. I think it's more just that the Rockets and the Cardinals have taken, a step forward, right? So that's probably the way I'd look at that division more than anything else.
Yeah. I just assume Bill's going to trade for 2 more Shane Biebers this year because he does it every year, and I don't know how he does it, but he makes 2 trades a year where I look at it and I think to myself, how in the blue hell did he convince that team to do that? Because I don't get it, but he does it every year. So at some point, you just got to give the guy credit for being really good at the trade game, and
Absolutely.
he does it every year. So apparently he knows what he's doing.
All right, guys, that wraps up the ACL, the South, and the East. We'll move on over to the other side of the league with the PCL. Let's start with the North, why don't we? That gives us a chance to start off number 4 in the PCL North with our good buddy Joe and the Amish Brotherhood coming in with a power score of 11.6. And so now we see that, Joe, congratulations, you are not projected to be the worst team in the BDL this year. That, in fact, is the Memphis Chicks.
Well,
So,
give me a chance.
It might be what
Give
Joe
him
wants.
time.
I
Give
mean,
him
that might
time.
be what would be best for the Amish. So,
Yeah.
Maybe. Moving on, number 3, the Killer Car Company, power score of 11.0. Number 2, the Mounties, 7.9. We'll see what the newcomer has in store and whether that can be improved upon. And we've talked about the Beers a little bit already, briefly. Number 1 projected in the North with a very impressive power score of 5.0, one of the best in the league this year. So number 1, the former BDL champions, and we did remember this time, Chris, former BDL champions, Malibu Bay. Number 2, the Mounties. Number 3, the Killer Cars. Number 4, the fallen and lowly Amish Brotherhood.
Well, let me get the jinx out of the way right now, Scotty. I'm picking the Bears to make the BDL final. I think they're the favorites to win the title this year.
Oh my!
And you guys can talk about it now that I've jinxed this roster. Go ahead, guys. Go ahead, Joe.
Don't be bashful. Anyone?
All right. So I love the moves that Chris has made this year. I beat you last year, didn't I, Chris?
yeah, I don't want to get into that.
Okay. So I think you probably spent the off season stewing over that. I mean, I'm guessing.
I would.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell,
I lost by
Johnny was
Joe. I
probably
lost by
stewing over this.
one home run. That was a roster error that Scotty can vouch me.
It's a roster error.
Is this true or false, Scotty?
The only
True or
reason
false?
you beat me was a roster error. I love that.
Scotty, tell me if I'm wrong.
Nothing tarnishes the BDL trophy, Chris. Move on.
Okay. Just saying.
It's great.
All right. So I think every move that he's made this year has, I don't know. I look at Chris's team as a better version of the Elevation. It's a better lineup. He's loading up his pitching staff. They're not fabulous pitchers, but he's got a shit ton of them, and he will beat pretty much everyone in our. Well, I know he's going to beat everyone in our division. He'll beat everyone in the West, and he will be in the finals. I agree. I don't know that he's got the team that's going to knock off the Rockets or the Cardinals or the Generals or the Wallabies. I don't know that he's got that kind of team, but he will certainly keep it really close in the finals, and I'm okay with that. North Pride.
Yeah,
If I can't win it, someone in the North better.
when I look at this division, I guess I'm a little surprised that it actually shapes up kind of similar to the South in the way that you had, some of those scores. I mean, not having the Amish down as far as the Chicks, but still kind of having two teams that I think are, in the top sector and, two in the bottom. And obviously, Joe, your Amish being in the bottom is on purpose, right? I mean, obviously that's something you've been looking to make adjustments to. I mean, obviously, in this division, we've kind of, I would say 3 of us have flip-flopped over the last couple of years, right? Just based on, really what moves we're making at the time, depending on which direction we want to take our team.
Sure.
I think, yes, I've tried to push as many chips in as I can. Glad to see that the stats project me to kind of be in line with, some of these other, Rockets, Cardinals, et cetera. But, I think I'm going to have to do a significant amount of work this year to keep that team, playing up with those other teams. And obviously, our division plays the East this year too, which I think is interesting. I think that actually might deflate the wins, kind of coming through to me, as well as potentially, those 3 teams we mentioned in the East. So I think it'll be interesting to see, those two divisions run up against each other with, so far kind of the top three teams projected being in those two divisions. So, I think there's going to be a lot of work. I think it's interesting with the Mounties. I mean, they also, I would say, have a good pitching staff. So I'm going to have to try and keep up with that. But, they're definitely lagging behind in some of the offensive categories. So, it's
Yeah.
interesting to look at this team that Steven took over because, I mean, you go back to 2019 and, this team destroyed this division, right? I mean, I think they had the best record in the league if I think back. They actually probably second behind the Cardinals, but then last year things kind of went awry. So I think now they're just kind of trying to piece this back together. And in terms of Johnny, I mean, he's going to have some other priorities. Congrats, Johnny, on the first kid. But I think he's going to have some pieces that he's going to have to figure out. Coming up here soon. So
Yeah.
Chris, Steven's team lost to you last year in a really close matchup. I mean, I thought the winner of your matchup last year was going to go to the finals.
Yep.
As did I.
Steven took over a pretty solid team, and that's going to be a solid team again this year.
Sure.
I haven't seen, adding Kutchel is not like going to blow anyone away, but he still had a solid team to begin with. He's going to be right there in the playoffs. But yeah, he's not on your level. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I still think he has a good shot to make the playoffs, right? I mean, we haven't talked about the West yet. I think that's going to be an interesting division, but I think the team that does finish second in the North has a pretty good shot at making, getting a wild card seat.
Yeah, I think so too.
The Mounties are they're in an interesting position. If you look at the stats, if you look at the projections, to say that they are one of the best clubs in the league on the pitching side of the scoreboard is a huge understatement. You're looking at right now that the Mounties are projected to finish in first place in 3 different pitching categories over the course of 2021: ERA, saves, and WHIP. They're also in the top 10 in the other 2 pitching categories. It's on the offensive side of the scoreboard where they really fall short. In fact, they're last place in the league in 2 of those categories, runs and RBI, and second to last place in another category, home runs. If they can find a way to shore up those deficiencies without sacrificing too much pitching, the Mounties could be interesting. They really could be interesting. But it'll just depend on how savvy Steven proves to be in making those kinds of moves happen. And of course, Chris, your Beers, like we've already mentioned, one of only 3 teams in the league this year that is in the top 10 across the board. You're number 1 in strikeouts. That is a designation usually reserved for Ort and his elevation, just due to the volume of pitchers there. But that's the way it's shaking out right now. Number 3 in runs, number 3 in saves, and you're kind of scattershot across the other categories here and there. I think the projections show that the Mounties that is a team to watch for sure in my book this year.
Yeah, now if I could make a different call to Steven, I would just say, listen, the offense, you're not there. Trade away that pitching. Don't bother this year. Don't worry about it. Just find another team that needs some pitching and play for next year. Just don't. I'll put that out there for him.
I think for the Mounties also, guys, we need to get back to that point I mentioned earlier about the stats, including all of our roster spots. He currently has a 2-man bench, and that's what he's probably going to begin the season with, where a lot of the teams we're comparing him to do not have 2-man benches. Offensively, if you actually look at the players on his roster, it's pretty good. Like, he's got Jose Ramirez, he's got Bryce Harper. Like, it's a good above average lineup. It's not Chris's lineup by any stretch, but I think this is going to be a team that offensively will finish in the top half of clubs, and pitching wise is going to finish in the top 3 or 4. And that to me is a likely playoff team if you do that.
Oh yeah, I agree, 100%.
What is scary about that Bears team is that team is stacked and they have 1 player over the age of 30 in that lineup. So that team's going to be really good for a long time.
That's not by accident.
No, it's not. I know that.
Guys, where are the killer cars right now?
Philly,
Where are
right?
they?
Yeah, then Philly, I think.
Wander is gonna come up and pitch like Cy Young. He's not even gonna bother hitting because Johnny doesn't need him to hit. He's gonna come up and pitch.
I don't get the cards. 2 or 3 years ago, I remember writing an article saying this was the beginning of kind of their new dynasty. And I don't think I've ever been as wrong on a prediction ever. I don't know what happened. Because that team, if you look back at the players he had on that team, had he just kept all of those players and done nothing, I think this is a really good team right now. And when I look at this roster, it's just kind of blah for me. Like there isn't anything special on this team. Like their highest ranked hitter is a guy that no one heard of 12 months ago. The Tampa Bay outfielder, Randy Rosarena. He's probably their highest ranked hitter. And if that guy's in the minor leagues in 6 months, I wouldn't be shocked. Pitching wise, I don't see a really great pitcher on this. This to me isn't a good team. Like they're just not a good roster right now. Silent.
We're sorry, Johnny.
Yeah. Am I off on this, guys? Like when you guys look at that roster, are you seeing something that I'm missing?
I thought his team was going to be great a few years ago when he had all those hitters were in that lineup. I just wished he would have gone out and gotten a couple of pitchers because that's what he hasn't had in forever. So I don't know what I'm looking at on his team right now. It's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing with that team is, listen, I don't, not saying they're going to compete this year because I don't think that's the case, and I don't necessarily think that's Johnny's intent, but I still would never count out, really just being able to flip that switch at a certain point. Now, obviously he's going to have to make that commitment to do that. I mean, Johnny and I talk trades a lot, and I think he's still looking and tinkering, through a lot of things. So, I think the effort can definitely be there. And like I said, I don't think it's this year, but again, any time that, I think, let's say my team falters over the next year or so and the Mounties stay where they are and the Amish are starting to come up, I don't see why, Johnny can't do the same thing there. So, I think there's, teams that don't have the pieces. I don't think that that's the killer cars. I think they just have to find how to, kind of put those pieces to effective use.
Well, if you look at his team right now, he has arms. I mean, he's got a nice stable of arms that are coming up. He hasn't had that in a while. So if the minor leaguers that he has, Marte, the kid in Tampa Bay, I always forget his name, the number one prospect. If those guys come up and
he's got CJ Abrams, Bronco. I mean,
that's right. I forgot about that dude.
Yeah.
So if those pitchers can come up and be as effective as he thinks they're going to be, he's got a team that can make some noise. It's going to be a couple years, just like some of the other teams, young teams that we've talked about. But that's the difference between this Cars roster and the great roster that he had in the past. Is he got some arms that are coming up.
Yeah, I'm just a believer in the adage of there's no such thing as a pitching prospect. I when I look at teams with great pitching prospects, I just assume that 75% of those guys aren't going to work out. So if you got 8 great guys, I assume you got 2 good arms. Just because the failure rate on these guys is just so high. It is really hard for me to look at a team with a bunch of great pitching prospects and just think this is going to work out for you.
Well, you just have to stay away from the high school right-handers, right?
I've heard that somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, I've heard that somewhere.
And Joe, with all due respect, the Amish suck this year, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time there at the bottom of this division. But
I think
we
Scott,
do need
purpose. Typically, they just suck. This year, he's purposely sucking. So it's
Well,
important to point that out.
I just
All
want
right,
to point
so
out
well,
one thing.
I was
on the
I was
Amish.
going to give him a 10-minute platform tonight, but he made us wait 30 minutes before he graced us with his presence. So
I can
give
squeeze
us
that 10 into 2.
give us what are you doing? Give
Okay.
us give us
All right.
what are you doing?
All right. Let me step up on the soapbox, my brothers. So last year, I barely beat Johnny. I beat Chris on a technicality. Allegedly. I did that. Please keep in mind, I did that with 6 guys on my roster who are probably not rosterable. I'm just talking about my lineup. So I didn't have a team that was going to compete for a playoff spot this year. I knew that when I traded the closers. I moved 4 guys outside of the 2 closers. 4 guys, and I went from a playoff team to bottom 3. I mean, that tells you what the roster I was dealing with. What I was dealing with. So that was an easy, just sell some pieces and start over, and I'm never going to make a trade again. So it's going
I've
to
heard
be
that
perfect.
before. I've heard that before.
And I'm not going to draft anymore because I looked at the history of my draft over the last, I've been in this league like 13 years. I had one good draft. I take that back. I had one good draft. I traded all of them for Arenado.
Mhm.
So there you go.
Now,
Every
Joe,
other year,
one thing I'll say about
sucked.
your club, though, Joe, as
Yeah.
as opposed to Johnny, where I say he's got a bunch of pitching prospects and I don't buy all these guys working out, Joe has the best collection of minor league hitters in our league, and those guys tend to hit at a much better clip than the pitchers do. So I would not be surprised if in 2 years Joe has one of the best young lineups in this league. I can't speak on the pitching side because I'm not as familiar with his pitchers. Because in classic Joe form, I haven't heard of half of these guys, but that's all right. Uh, but on the hitting side, if you
I
look
know
at his
who they are.
league, they are really really good. Between Spencer Torkelson and Jordan Grosh, like he's super deep in minor league hitters, and I think he's going to have a nice lineup in a year or two.
Yeah, the only thing I want to say about the Amish, and this is more of just a comment to Joe, you have to start 7 pitchers, and I don't think you have 7 on your roster. And you do have to pitch 30 innings a week.
Well, what you guys don't know, I'm going to be a streaming SOB this year.
Him and Ort.
Oh, yeah. Well, shit. Ort's already got 30 pitchers. I'm going to
Yes.
pull every waiver suck ass, start them every week.
You
I'm
know
okay
what?
with that, I think.
I noticed you're right. He has 5 pitchers on this roster. I've never seen anything like this before.
Good grief, Joe.
I've
Seems
never
like the
seen this.
Vollison initiative really screwed over your team or something.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
Didn't think I was going to go down that road, did you, Scott?
we need to move on. Okay. Got the North taken care of. All right, let's move on to the final division in our preview, the PCL West. Number four, the Lions with a power score of 10.4. Number 3, the Wrigleyville Woo, power score of 10.2. Number 2, this is interesting based on some recent moves that were made. Number 2, the Crawford Cramps with a power score of 8.6. And number 1, Kill Devil Hills Elevation with a power score of 7.8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that's Elevation, Cramps, Woo, Lions. And I would point out that the first place projected team in the West this year happens to have the worst power score rating of all projected divisional first place teams.
Yeah,
This surprises me. Go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, before I looked at any stats, I looked at each of the divisions and just tried to pick who I thought was going to win. I think the 3 that shook out in this process were in the other divisions were the 3 that I picked. On the face, I picked the Cramps to win it again without really doing much more look into it. And then once I kind of put the numbers to it, that's where the elevation always come out on top here. Listen, does the elevation have as good of a hitting lineup as maybe even two of the other teams in this division? No, but I think the way that they've always pieced together their hitting and then leaned on the pitching side has always really driven them to success here. I think it's going to be very interesting this year because of how pitching, or I should say, how pitchers may be used. And that might actually work out to Ort's advantage because, there's going to be guys that we may never even heard of coming up to pitch when, every starter is limited to 150 innings, right? That's an extreme, but, something like that could happen. And Ort is the best at having those guys already on his roster when you first hear about them, right? So, he may be able to play that game and dominate a lot of these pitching categories. And as long as his hitting is good, he's going to win the division.
But he's not. Because his lineup isn't as good as Brian's, not even close.
No, definitely agree.
And he'll take 2 pitching categories each week. So when he faces Brian, he's going to take pitching categories, 2 of them, which are the counting stats, minus saves. I think they're Brian and Ort both have the same amount of closers, but I think Brian's team will take all 5 hitting cats.
Maybe not steals.
Maybe
not steals.
No.
He takes 4, and he takes 2 of the pitching cats. Yeah. Brian's set up to do that.
Yeah.
To pretty much everyone he plays. So he needs to go get a closer, and he's got no pieces to trade for a closer unless he starts moving some of the younger pitchers. Do that.
It's just really hard for me to look at Brian's roster and imagine him not winning that division. Like Tatis, Trout, Soto, Freeman, like this. I just can't see a world where he does not win this division because his pitching isn't as awful as it's been in prior years, and his lineup is better than it was in prior years. I just can't imagine a world outside of him just having a couple of ridiculous injuries. I just can't see him not winning this division. I think Orton will make the playoffs just because of how he runs his club. I just don't see him knocking Brian off in this division.
They're very, very close. This is another coin flip. So the elevation, based on the projections, they best the Cramps in all 5 pitching categories. Saves are very close, and wins are pretty close as well. The elevation also much better team when it comes to stolen bases. Much better team. You're looking at a 4th place ranking compared to a 13th place ranking for Crawford, but the Cramps do pick up the majority of the offensive stats. They're a good home run hitting team, great average, 2nd in the league projected in average, and top 10 across the league in the 4 that they would best the elevation in those stats. So you're looking at it from this point of view, it would be a 6-4 in favor of the elevation. So it's, if anything went wrong for Ort, that would change.
Yeah.
So it's very close.
Yeah. I'm just a major believer in having stars that win games. And if you look at the top 100 players in this league, for instance, I think Gotham has the most. He's got 13. The Bears have 12. The Rockets have 12. Carolina has 11. Portsmouth has 12. And that's basically the teams most people would kind of pick to contend. The Cramps have 8. The Elevation have 2. And I think when you have that sort of a drop in star players, I think that's something that 9 times out of 10, the team with the most stars is going to win. And again, if you have no depth anywhere and all you have is those stars players, that's one thing. I think Brian's team is deep enough now where that star power should win the day for him.
Because wouldn't you say Brian's team has always had star power? Wouldn't you guys? At least as far as I remember it,
they have, but I think the most recent moves he's made, bringing in Bauer, who again, I'm not a monster fan of Bauer, but playing NLA and for this year especially, I think he's going to lead the league in innings pitched. And playing on that team, I can't imagine him not winning a ton of games.
Yeah.
There's just no reason for me to think that his pitching is going to be bad this year. I think it's going to be average, and I think he's going to have one of the top 2 or 3 lineups in the league.
Yeah,
And,
and like I
and
said, I was, again, just looking at the division without looking at any stats. I had the Cramps number one. I think what's interesting to look at is, well, we went over to this new, kind of 4 divisions back in 2015, I believe. Throwing 2020 out because obviously we did a tournament. How many times do you think the Cramps have finished above the elevation since 2015?
maybe 0 because he hasn't been very good for a while.
You got it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's going to repeat itself. I'm just saying that Ort finds a way.
Yeah.
And Brian's there. I mean, I think he's there. I think the team's better. He just has to combat, Ort's survivability.
Yeah. I think the best way for me to put this is I think that the limit of Ort's team is to be a pretty good team. Like I can't see him finishing, with a better than say 550 record this year.
Yeah.
I think Brian's upside is much higher than that.
Yeah.
I think it's probably the best way for me to put it.
Yeah.
So let me jump in real quick. I don't want to discount what Alex is doing. He's going to finish in the basement in that division, but he's got a bright future. I really like John's team next year to make a playoffs. Trevor Bauer is going to win 35 games. You heard it here first. And the elevation, once again, will be the team no one wants to face in the playoffs.
Nope, you're right about that.
And, Brian's going to win the division. I wouldn't be shocked if Ort beats him, in the playoffs in the first or second round, beats Chris in the first round, whatever. Because Ort's team is a freaking nightmare to play.
Mm-hmm. When you know going in that you can scratch a couple of stats off that you just have no chance in, that's really hard to play against a team like that. And when you play against, you're not going to win Ks, and there's a really good chance you're not taking wins either. And he has enough closers most times where saves is a coin toss. It's really hard knowing that if you have a bad day, a below average week for your team in the plate, there's no chance you have of winning. And that he's a real pain in the ass to play against, quite honestly.
Aren't you Eastern guys lucky you don't have to face him?
I'd rather play Ort 20 times in a row than play the teams in the East.
Not in the playoffs.
No, again, I'd rather play Ort.
Jeez.
I'd rather play him every single week than have to play the Damage and the Cardinals and the Double Downs.
You're going to have to send Ort a basket of Reese cups and roses or something. This is just savage.
No, he knows next time he shows up in Phoenix, he's buying.
Gosh.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo that on both the Lions and the Woo. I mean, they're moving in the right direction, right? I mean, I think none of us are going to say that this is the year, but, there's pieces there. There's young talent. And, as it always shakes out, you just have to bet on that talent kind of, coming together at the same time and or, selling it off to, when you have a couple of people hit. But, I wouldn't say that either of those teams are that far away. Again, it's just going to be a challenge to see what happens with those Cramps. I mean, if those, the moves they made kind of take them to that next level and makes it a little bit harder for the Woo and the Lions to catch up. And then, like I said, Ort's are always there. So, regardless of what you think of Ort's team, he's going to be there. And, these two guys are just going to have to find that right time, hopefully. And, probably what they're betting on is that they both don't try to go all in at the same time, because that's going to be the challenge. I think, those teams look kind of similar. If they're going to both cash in at the same time, that's might be more of a challenge for them.
John is like the silent assassin. We haven't heard from him lately, but I'm telling you, next year he's going to come out swords blazing and carve shit up.
He's a silent assassin that murders nobody. So,
well, we're a kid-friendly show, right?
That's a good point.
Okay. All right. All right, that takes care of our four divisions: north, south, east, west. I want to take a look just at overall at the division rankings, the divisions themselves, very briefly. And I'll start from top, go down to bottom, because I think the story here is at the bottom. Number one, no surprise, you have a collective um, power score number of 6.45 for the East Division. Easily the best projected team in the league. Again, no surprise. Number two, the North, with a collective power score of 8.87. Then we drop down to the West at number three and the South at number four. But the story, I believe, is in the fact that those power scores are incredibly close. 9.25 for the West, 9.42 for the South. And the South, of course, which is or has been historically over the last few years known as the kind of the powder puff division of the BDL. Um, that number, do you think that is more indicative of the bottom half of the West getting worse, the bottom half of the South maybe getting better, something else? We may see for the first time as soon as this year, maybe next year, or maybe not at all, but could see for the first time in several years um, a different division slide down to sort of that basement of the BDL.
Yeah, I think you're being overly kind to the South, Scotty. I think you have two good teams in the South, and that's kind of driving up their numbers. One of those teams, the Gens, have really sold out to be really good this year. I think in 2 or 3 years, the South might be worse than ever.
Wow.
Yeah, that's my call on that. Chris, Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I can see that happening, right? Even if you just look at the way that these scores came together, especially Scotty with the kind of the round robin that you run, right, with your team, right? If if you decide to sell out, which not saying you will, because again, you're in a good position in that division, but let's just say that chips fall that way, and the other teams don't come back up, that's going to be an issue. I mean, I think what's driving the South score, as Mike just said, is the top two teams and then the bottom two, whereas I think in the West, you're a little bit closer together. And I think those teams have, I would say the Lions and the Woo probably have a better chance, competing in the short term than probably more than the Chicks. I mean, the Vipers, I think, are on that same level. So I think that's just kind of the concern is if the Generals and Wallabies get a little worse, I think that division falls. And I think if in some of those teams in the West, I probably see them getting a little bit better. That would kind of, keep that going.
I don't know. I like the South improving more so than the West. I think the Chicks are a team that will be reckoned with. I like what Michael's done with the Vipers. I think those teams are ahead of the game than the Lions, although I like what Wu is doing. I don't think the South will be the doormat of the BDL in 2 years. They
What
are
division?
right now.
What division do you think will be, Joe?
The North. I can bring them down, baby.
Further you go down, the further I go up, my friend.
Yeah, I just don't see that. I just don't see that. Like, I think the Bears are going to have a long run at the top. I think the Mounties got a nice club. Steven hasn't made the mistake a lot of new owners make when they come to this league by being super aggressive and making a lot of dumb moves. Johnny at some point is going to figure things out,
Yeah.
right? I would imagine. And the Amish, as much as we'd like to kid Joe, I fully expect that team to be pretty good in a couple of years again.
Yeah. Joe, you know what you're doing. Come on.
Wait a minute. Who said that?
Yeah,
Come
I
on now. Once
No
again,
one
I did
until now.
mention you smoking in Denver.
Okay, so let's move on then to sort of wrap up our overall projections as we put a close or close the book here on our preseason coverage on the Inside Pod. Number five, Again, just to recap the top to bottom standings, or not recap, but we've already gone over all these teams, but just for clarity's sake, start from the bottom. League-wide, number 16, the Chicks. Number 15, the Amish Brotherhood. Number 14, the Killer Cars. Number 13, the Vipers. Number 12, the Woo. Number 10, the Double Downs. Number 9, the Cramps. Number 8, the Mounties. Number 7, the Elevation. Number 6, the Wallabies. Top 5, number 5, NorCal Damage. Number 4, the Generals. Number 3, the Beers. Number 2, the Cardinals. And the number 1 projected team in 2021, the defending champion, Rockland Rockets. So just to recap the division winners, we have the Generals taking the South, the Rockets taking the East, the Beers taking the North, and the Elevation taking the West. So before we move on to final projections, any further comments on the league-wide standings?
I think we got the top 8 right. I'd probably mix them up a little bit. But I think we have the top 8 clubs correct.
No chance. There's no way the Cramps are going to finish 9th. There's no way they're the 9th best team.
Are they 8th? Hold on. Do I have that wrong?
No, they're 9th. The Cramps, based on the PowerScores, the Cramps
I misspoke.
number 9.
I thought they were 8, which is part of the mix-up I'd have. Okay, so so the top 9 I think we have right, and I would change the order. So,
let me recap the top 10 again, just for clarity. Number
I mean,
one,
Mike's eventually going to get to we have the top 16 right. Just change up.
Number 1, the Rockets. Number 2, Cardinals. Number 3, Beers. Number 4, Generals. Number 5, Damage. Number 6, Wallabies. Number 7, Elevation. Number 8, Mounties. Number 9, Cramps. And number 10, the Boston Double Downs.
Okay. Yeah, Crawford is obviously too low there. I think I'm too high. I think NorCal might be a little high. Beyond that, I think it's pretty close to how things are going to work out.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, I think that's where we have them line out. I mean, again, these scores are, maybe indicative of a point in time value of our team, right? But, I think when I hear the top clubs, that's who I expect to be those top clubs. But again, that could change with a trade made tomorrow, right? So, I think it's all going to come down to, said it a couple of times, really the work you put into it, from now up into the trade deadline. And, I think that's probably where those movements are going to be. The teams that make those moves are going to change up their positions. The teams that don't will drop down.
Agreed. I think the top 4 is right. Let's put it that way. I think Rockland, Carolina, Malibu, Gotham, in some order, are the best 4 teams on paper right now.
Yeah. And then who knows about injuries, right? I don't even want to get into that.
Of course.
I'm going to go
with 6 guys to injuries, and a complete derail his team, of course.
I will say the top 3 I have no problem with. I'm a little edgy with the next 3 on that list. And I think Brian should probably be 5, maybe 6 if he doesn't make any moves. But his team's great.
I can see that. I can see that.
I'm going to finish 10th, by the way.
I can't see that.
I should finish last. I mean, theoretically, I have a really shitty team, but
there's one thing I know about you.
I'm going all in.
Yeah. If you're aiming for last place, I have full faith that you'll find a way to screw that up too, and you'll come like 3rd last just to mess up your draft pick. I have full confidence in you messing that up.
I will.
Yep.
Okay, guys. Final comments. The Power Score tells us that the team to rise out of the ACL, the best team in the ACL, the Rockland Rockets, will battle the best team in the PCL, the Beers. Hey, Chris. Hey, Mike. In the BDL finals in 2021. Clearly, this is incorrect, but just judging by the Power Scores, we're going to talk about it. The Rockets would be, of course, the projected winner and would be. I used to be able to know these things. I used to be able to recall these things off the top of my head, but the older the league gets, it's more difficult. It would be the first time we've had a repeat champ in a number of years anyway, quite a few.
Is Bill the last
Um,
repeat champ?
I believe Bill was the last repeat champ in 09 and 10
Yeah, and he almost won in
because
11. Yeah.
you had the Rockets in 11, Wallabies 12, Cramps 13, Generals 14.
It is kind of cool that we haven't had a repeat champ in that long. It does speak
15
to
was
the
50,
depth of the league. That
15
hasn't happened.
15 was I'm trying to maybe I can pull that up.
I'll have it on sec. It's on the main league page. 15 was damage. Damage, Scorpions,
15.
Generals, Beers, Cardinals, Rockets.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've not had a repeat champ since in more than 10 years.
Yeah, 2009, 2010.
Since the 2009, 2010 damage. So it's been a very long time.
That's kind of cool.
It has happened twice in the history of the league. You had the two Farsta titles in 06 and 07, both of which were horrendous flukes, but nevertheless they live forever on our league page.
I mean, we can change them on here.
I think Scotty would love to do that. Give me back the title I should have won in 2007.
I've been robbed twice.
Yeah,
that's what we're not getting into that. But so does anyone on the call and this? Well, I can't ask it this way because we've got Mike and Chris both on the call. But Joe, let me ask you: do you vehemently disagree with what the projections show us that the Rockets will best the Bears in the BDL finals?
I do. Hell, go ahead, Joe.
Let me tell you a little story about the challenges of defending 1998 University of Arizona Wildcats. Steamrolled their way
in
the NCAA tournament. They bitch slapped everyone. Sorry, I probably shouldn't use that language. They dominated everyone. Came across some Utah team. Bunch of shitty players, if I'm being honest. And they got railroaded by Rick Majerus.
So you're saying I'm going to lose to a bald owner with a bad club? Is that what you're telling me?
I think what I'm saying is something is going to happen to one of those two teams, yours or Chris's, and you're going to get upset by some team that doesn't deserve to be in the finals.
Yeah, see, I think that's completely off. Just because I think the four teams that are going to make the playoffs in the ACL are all of the exact same tier. I think Rockland, Carolina, Gotham, and the Wallabies or the Damage. I think you throw those five teams in a hat and pick your winner out of a hat. I would be much more surprised for Malibu to not make the finals than me not make the finals. I'm picking Malibu to be in the finals. I'm not picking my team to be in the finals.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I build a team to make it to the playoffs. What happens there is madness, right? Like we all know that. It's kind of what you just said. I mean, I think the team on paper, if the Bears and the Rockets make it to the finals, I give the edge to the Rockets. Now, again, who knows if either of our teams on paper are really going to be what it is. So, I think it's really just going to come down to adjustments and tweaks that we make. I'm pretty confident that the teams we discussed here will be in those playoffs. And as Mike just said it, I mean, you put them in a hat, you pull them out. I mean, I could go up against the Elevation and get beat, right? I mean, that's an easy thing. I could go up against the Cramps and get beat, right? Like it's any of those things are absolute possibilities. And it all comes down to just what you can do to prepare for that, going into those final matchups.
You guys kill me. You guys are way too kind. If I ever make the finals, and that may never happen, but if I ever do, I'm going to be on a BDL show, and I'm going to say, my opponent, whoever you may be, I'm going to take your nuts and put them on the ground, and I'm going to stomp on them.
You were in the finals last year.
You did the finals last year. How'd that work out?
Yeah, but I shouldn't have been in the finals last year.
You ain't shit me. Yeah, you're right. You shouldn't have been, but you were.
Yeah, I knew I wasn't supposed to be in the finals. That's why
we all did. We all knew you shouldn't be in the final, but you were.
Well, hey, time to have another beer. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think to speak to Chris's point, we build our teams to make the playoffs and see what happens. Because at the end of the day, once you get in the playoffs, it really comes down to injuries and luck, as far as I'm concerned. For me, I've always built my team for the regular season, and if it's a really good team in the regular season, you got a pretty good shot in the
Yeah,
playoffs.
I mean, in 2018, I was the third wild card team, I believe, right? I mean, that's what happens when you get into those playoffs, right?
Yep,
I mean, I think Matt in 2019 had the best record, but I don't think that's necessarily what happens, you know?
that rarely happens. The best team I
It
ever
rarely,
had,
Yeah,
the best team I
rarely.
ever had was in 2016. I think I lost the first round.
yeah.
Do you know the best team ever in the BDL was? 2017 Amish. We got hosed. Move on.
Okay. Yeah, we're moving on. All right.
Hold on, 2017 Amish?
Don't pay
Number
no
one
pay no
seed,
attention.
baby.
Number one, you're 625. That's like for me or Chris or Scotty. That's just like your typical year.
Hey,
You know,
you all
that's-
sucked that year. I had the best team.
If Chris
Well,
goes 625 this year, he'll consider it a giant disappointment. And that's like the greatest Amish team of all time.
Hey, I can't help that everyone wasn't good that year.
I'll just say this. I'm clearly the Generals are in the mix this year, so I don't agree with this projection at all. But I'll just say that I really really like Chris's team this year, and that's to take nothing away from the Rockets. Clearly, a great team in the BDL on paper this year. But in fact, I sent Chris a text. I don't know. That might have been 3 weeks ago, a month ago, something like that. Just kind of out of the blue, and said, "Wow, you've got a pretty special team," and it snuck up on me. I didn't realize, kind of what the moves that you were making and what it was leading to that quickly. Um, I think the Bears have a chance to be fairly special this year, but we'll see. As I said, Generals projected fourth place. I think the Gens are certainly among the best teams in the league. I don't care what Joe says for this.
I'm not saying you're going to miss the playoffs.
Just shut up. I have
How kind of
full
Joe
expectations
is
of
got you in the playoffs.
winning.
How kind of him.
I have full expectations of winning a third trophy this year, so I'm just setting that out there. But
I mean,
Well,
if you
I
set
really
your lineup now
Chris,
for the season,
At least you
I think
have
you'll
the
make the
cojones.
playoffs.
Okay, guys. Since we're all big on predictions, pick division winners, guys. All four. Scotty, who do you got?
all four.
All four. Three division winners.
Okay, I'm going to go from PCL up on my sheet. West. Man, that is a tough call, isn't it? I know you guys think the cramps are just there. That is a tough call.
Chris, you got to predict for us.
So that's just yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think I am going to stick. I'm going to stick with what the numbers show, and I'm going to pick the elevation in the West. It's so close. It's so close. I think the averages are going to play out in Ort's favor, though. The Bears are going to run away with the North.
Mm-hmm.
The Generals are going to win the South. The East, I mean, gosh, how do you even? That's just that is a coin flip if I have ever seen one between the Rockets and the Cardinals. No disrespect to the damage.
You got to pick one.
Yeah, I'll go with the Rockets, but it's with hesitation.
Okay, Joe, who do you got?
No hesitation. Cramps, Rockets, Beers, Wallabies.
Okay, Chris, who you got?
You're an idiot.
So in the West, like I said, when I did the first review, just looking at teams without really looking at any stats, I had the cramps. Once I dug into it, I am going to go elevation here, but again, I think that those are two very close, and I really think that both will make the playoffs. So I don't know that it necessarily even matters who wins that division. South, I got the Generals. North, I got myself. And then again, similarly in the East, I have the Rockets winning, but that's not a knock on the Cardinals. And again, they're going to be in the playoffs. So, it really just comes down to, I think those two teams will be able to pretty effectively beat up on the other divisions, even if they have to play each other twice. So, I think those teams are good to go. And I'm going to give the nod to the Damage. I think the Damage will also make the playoffs.
Okay. And I have Cramps, Beers, Gens, Cardinals. So which means the only division we agree on are the Beers, and I think that's going to be pretty much a blowout. We're 50-50 on the West. All except for Joe because he's a schmuck. And we've all, except for me, everyone's got the Rockets because you guys are far too nice to me. So, I think at the end of the day, we've got most of the playoff teams picked here. I think Cramps, Elevation, Beers making the PCL. I think Rockets, Cardinals, Gens, and Wallabies make the playoffs in the ACL, and now we just got to find that fourth team in the
No Damage.
No, I think the Wallabies are pretty underrated, honestly. I think they're a little.
So you think the second place team, regardless, the second place team in the South is going to take home a wild card?
I think in this case, yeah, I think they will.
That's a risky
Assuming
pick.
Brent is awake all season, which is no lock. But if he's active, I think his team is good enough to win the division. Honestly, I don't think they will win the division, but I think they're going to be close enough to you to get that second wild card spot.
Said like a true co-host. The Wallabies make the playoffs because the South is not that great.
It isn't, and the East is really, really good.
Exactly,
and it's really hard for the Damage and the Double Downs to go through the Cardinals and the Rockets 3 times. And again, granted, I think 2 years ago we all finished over 500 just because we beat the living shit out of the South, and that could happen again. But I don't think it will. I think the Wallabies and Gens are good enough to kind of play us all tough and beat the tar out of their division, and I think that'll be enough to get them that top 4 spot in the ECL.
All right. Any more comments on the 2021 predictions? Nothing.
We're tired. We're tired.
How much time do we have?
Well, we're gonna put a nice little bow on this show with a segment called BDL Dream Team that Chris is going to lead us through here in a few minutes. But let's pause briefly, if you don't mind, all of us together, for 45 seconds of laughter at the expense of the worst team in the league projected this year, the Memphis Chicks.
But wait a second, weren't we told by somebody that this is going to be a team that was going to contend for the division title? Weren't we told that, Scotty? Who told us
I'm
that?
pretty sure that was in our inaugural interview.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
somebody told us that. I thought I heard that somewhere. Not so much for what you hear. Sometimes you can't believe everything you hear.
Not in that case.
No.
Okay, Chris, my friend.
Sounds good.
BDL Dream.
Sounds good.
What do you
so
got?
I don't have a fancy disclaimer like Scotty, but what I will do is if you guys can open up your stats, and I'll let you guys kind of take a quick peek at it while I walk through a little bit of what I did here. So similarly to the way that Scotty generated some of those rankings, I went in and pulled, kind of starting lineup stats, right? So this isn't going top to bottom depth. If you have, 100 first basemen on your team, you're not getting credit for all those stats. I literally took the best, players that you had in your infield, the best players you had in your outfield, and your top 5 starting pitching. and essentially combine those stats together for each team's. What I shared with these guys is essentially let's call it a blank resume of stats for each of the teams, kind of in the 5x5 categories perspective. I took out saves because I didn't go into closers, etc. But what they're looking at is essentially, the top 6 to 7 teams in each of these categories. And what we're going to go through and do is hopefully come to consensus on which infield we would choose, which outfield we would choose, and which best starting 5 we would choose without knowing what teams they are. And then essentially I'll decode, these letters that I gave to them, and we can kind of say, which starting lineup we would have. What I will say to these guys that as they're looking at these, all of the team A's are not the same, all the team B's are not the same, etc. So, if you think that one team A is all one squad, it's not. These are all randomized. And I did do my best to essentially pull the best options for each of your teams. So, for example, if your best first baseman was in your corner infield, I just included that in your infield basis. So again, it just looks
So
at,
when you say infield, just catcher for a second,
it's not
shortstop,
catcher.
third, right?
That's what I was going to say.
Not
So infield
catcher.
is going to be your first base, your second base, your third base, your shortstop. I took out catcher because catcher was really just baseline outside of your catcher.
Well, therefore, you should have included my catcher. Yes,
Exactly.
all right.
And
All
then
right.
outfield is your top 4 outfielders, and then starting pitcher is your top 5 starting pitchers.
Okay.
So, quick question. Why aren't we including CI and MI?
Because no one likes the Volosevich.
Okay, just want to make that sure.
Yeah. All right.
And Joe, just to answer your question, I did it just because once we started to get more and more stats, it just started to neutralize it. So it was more of just trying to look at, who you would want the best, kind of the best of your, the best of the best here.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we look at infield, and again, hopefully you guys all have this up. Again, I don't really have these sorted by any way, although they kind of look like they're sorted by home runs, but they're not. You guys want to throw out what you may think the best one of these looks like on paper?
Yeah, sure. So go ahead, Scotty. Go ahead.
No, okay. I'll take infield. Or do you want to go name each of them, Chris?
Well, what would be good is if,
guess,
just based on the time we have, it would be nice if we can just agree on, which, maybe if we get a consensus on which one we think's the best, we can just go from there instead of trying to pick one.
I'll just start then. I like Team D for the infield.
So Team D.
I'm the opposite.
Okay.
Hold on. Did you say B or D, Scotty?
D is in dog.
Okay. D was one of the ones I threw out right off the bat. I threw out D, E, and F because I want some steals out of my infield.
Yep. Yeah.
So to me, it's A, B, C, or D. Those teams are all pretty even to me. I'll throw out A because I want some batting average. So now I'm down to B, C, and D. And those teams are pretty even. I'll go with B. Maybe C is close, but I'll go with Team B.
Okay.
I can live with that rationale. I can. Joe, do you have a comment on the infield?
No.
Do you have a pick on the infield, Joe?
I like B. I mean, B for me. No reason. I just like B over D. It's ahead in the alphabet.
Yeah, I don't know who Team B is, so I think I can weigh in. I mean, I do agree. Just to give everybody listeners what we're looking at. We're looking at 400 runs, 126 home runs, 400 RBIs, 42 stolen bases, and a 284 batting average. I think the reason, and I settled on Team B as well, I think because it just seems to be the most well-rounded. They are the highest in runs and RBIs, definitely in the top tier in stolen bases. A tick below in power, but they kind of make up for it on the average side. So we'll go with Team B for now, and then, like I said, I'll let you know which one that is once we get to the end of this. So outfield's up next.
Who wants to go first on this one?
Outfield. I had Team B. B as in boy.
I'm gonna go B as well. I like home runs are sexy, and since I gave them up in the infield, I want to lead in the outfield.
Yeah, I think I'm with you guys. For me, I throw out the teams with the bad batting average and the ones with no steals. I think B is the most balanced of these clubs, so I'll go with Team B.
Yeah, I'm with you. So what we're looking at in Team B is 380 runs, 136 home runs, 381 RBIs, 50 steals, and a 280 batting average. So that puts it top in the league in home runs by, again, 12 projected. I mean, obviously, we can all argue what that is. Pretty close to the top in runs, the top in RBIs, just below the top in stolen bases, and pretty high up there in average, almost tied for first there. So
Hmm.
Team B again. And again, I don't think it's the same team. If it is, that's random. All right, so starting pitching. Again, this is just the top 5 starting pitchers, so really doesn't take into account depth. Really just obviously looks at the top of your, kind of the top of your squad. And we actually do have 9 teams here to look at, just because I think there was such a varying degree of stats that we have here. So, you guys have any thoughts on what you think looks best?
Yeah, Scott, you want to go
Yeah,
first
this
again?
sure. This is a lot
Yeah, it
tougher.
is. It is.
I would probably lean either Team F or Team H. But I might want to study that just a little harder. But that's my initial thought.
Yeah, team. So if I look at Team F, I guess I compare them to Team B, right? So Team
I'm with
B
you,
has
Joe.
10 more Ks, a decent advantage in ERA, and a decent advantage in WHIP, and only one less win.
Yeah. Yeah,
True.
yeah. For me, the way that I look at this is these are your top. What would you say, Chris? Your top 5 starters.
Just top 5. Yep.
Okay, so these are your top 5 starters. They better have good whip. So I'm eliminating anyone with a whip above 1.2, and that eliminates half this list. And once I do that, I settle on Team B. They're really high in Ks. They have a whip of 1.16. They're in the same group as far as wins are concerned, and their ERA is it top? Yeah, it's the best ERA. They're near the top of whip. So for me, it's Team B again.
So I'm guessing the Amish are none of these teams since I only have 4 starters.
I did eliminate the Amish from this one, yes.
I appreciate that. So without even looking at ERA or WHIP, I'm just focusing on the team that's going to strike out the most because I think that will affect WHIP and ERA in a good way, and is relatively high in wins. I'm going to go B as well.
Yeah, and I'd agree. And honestly, I did not do this on purpose that all 3 of these were Team B. That's really, really, really funny. That just tells you how randomized, kind of works out. So,
And now this would be so great if the Beers are Team B, and this is patting himself on the back. So you all
well,
agree I have the best team.
I
All right, good.
mean, my
That
team
would be
does
so great.
start with a B.
That would be so great. This would be the greatest scam ever. So we have a consensus, everyone. I'm the best team.
So just to highlight the stats for that, the Team B, it's 60 wins, 964 Ks, a 3.4 ERA, and a 1.16 WHIP. We have a couple of teams around 60 to 70 wins. 964 is the highest Ks for the top 5, and then that is kind of tied for the best WHIP and a slight tick advantage in ERA. So you guys want to guess who these teams are? Or you just want me to go through it?
Oh, jeez.
So Team B
Uh,
for infield. I mean, if you guys have any guesses, or if you just want to, I can just go for it.
I'm going to say
I don't.
Cramps.
Generals.
I don't want to guess, but I will say that if my catcher was included, I'd have the best infield. But go ahead and tell me what
What
it
do you
is.
say, Joe?
Cramps.
Joe's got it.
Hmm.
The Cramps are Team B, have the best infield. That's comprised of Freddie Freeman, Ozzy Albies, Nolan Arenado, and Fernando Tatis. Obviously, really driving up those numbers for them.
That's not bad.
Nope.
Do I get the number 1 draft pick because I guessed correctly?
No.
You might get it anyway. I mean,
Yeah, I know.
all right. So outfield. Any guesses who Team B is?
Generals.
Okay, we got.
I'm going Generals.
Anybody else?
I don't know. Let's say Cardinals. I don't know.
Okay. Team B in the outfield. the Portsmouth Wallabies.
Ooh.
Now, this one.
I don't like this game.
So this one was a challenge to me. So let me just read the names, then I'll tell you why it was a challenge. So it has
Yeah, this is surprising.
it
'Cause
has
this is not a
so it's
threat.
Yelich, Ozuna,
Yeah.
Austin Meadows, and then Lourdes Gurriel. So listen, I don't think any of us doubt the projections for Yelich and Ozuna, right? I'm just going to be curious to see if Meadows and Gurriel can keep up with what they have projected, right? I think that's what it's going to come down to for them. So again, on paper, without knowing who it is, that's who we chose. But when I heard the infield, like that's a slam dunk, that lineup. I think the outfield there's going to be just some questions. But again, on paper, based on projections, that's a fantastic starting outfield.
That's surprising because I would not have picked them to be anywhere near the top outfield.
Exactly. That's why I think this was so
That is
interesting when it comes out that way. All right. Starting pitcher. Who do we think we got? Team B.
That's tricky.
It's
Guys,
tough.
you have a thought?
If you guys want to guess, great. If not, I can go for it.
You know what? My
no.
top 5 is pretty good. So I'm going to go Rockets.
Okay.
Generals.
Oh, God.
Wallabies.
At some point, you might be right.
Team B in starting pitching is the Malibu Baby Ears.
There you go.
And that's
I don't agree with the 116 whip. I think that's
yeah.
wrong.
I mean, it's the same thing with the Wallabies in the outfield. So I mean, obviously, my top 5 is Barrios, Bueller, Gallen, Gray, and Greinke.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, having Gray and Greinke, who are typically low whip guys, are what is driving that down, Joe. But you're right. I mean, if those guys, not the youngest of guys, so if they, kind of falter in some of that, obviously that there'll be some regression there. And I will say this was kind of, taken a week ago, so even some things have changed since that point, just in terms of injuries, etc. But
Well,
Yeah,
when you
we got
mentioned
there.
those,
Yeah.
when you mentioned those 5 names, I'm not surprised at 116.
yeah, yep. So if we were just looking at the starting lineups for who our ideal setup, again, not looking at depth, we would take the Cramps infield, we would take the Wallabies outfield, and we would take the Beers starting pitching. So take that for what you will.
And this is interesting because the top 2 seeds on total projections were Carolina Rockets, and we're not in any of these. So that's
Exactly.
interesting.
Yeah.
Which just goes to show you that this is completely worthless, everybody. So let's throw it in the trash. All right.
So let's
Right,
do
Scotty?
that though.
Scotty,
So
do you agree? Do you agree, Scotty?
if we have a minute, let's look at that, right? So let's just say the Rockets and the Cardinals. So the Rockets on the infield are Team C.
Okay, let's take a look at that.
The Rockets on the outfield are Team E. And again, this isn't helpful for anybody on the phone, listening to us right now. And the Rockets for pitching are Team A.
Team A.
And I can share this information with everybody just so they can see what we're looking at. Maybe I can even post this as
You can.
Yeah.
You could post it in the podcast thread,
exactly.
Chris.
So as soon
maybe.
as you post the podcast, I'll post this so that actually people can be looking at what we're looking at.
So
Yeah.
And you know what?
That is surprising.
In theory, this actually makes some sense, though, because I probably have my team somewhere in the top 3 or 4 in all of those categories. And that's kind of how I build my team. We are rarely the best at anything, but we're usually top 5 in everything.
Yeah.
So I guess that makes some sense.
Well, and I think that's what's interesting to point out. I mean, listen, we talked about the Cramps being contenders. We talked about the Wallabies' chances. So, I think each of those 2 teams have pretty strong components that if, some of the other chips fall in line, I think, with all things being equal, we would actually pick their, rosters to, part of their rosters to be, the best for this year.
So can we start over from the beginning with our predictions? I'm surprised that Mike's team isn't a little bit higher there.
Yeah, I'm not shocked, just because Chris obviously purposely threw out my catcher to ensure that I didn't win the infield. Because if you include my catcher, I think I probably have the best infield. So he clearly did that on purpose. Let's get rid of all the average catchers and the 1 star, and let's do the numbers. All right.
Sorry, Mike. That's called a statistical outlier.
Oh gosh.
Poor Scotty's about to fall asleep.
This is completely asinine. I don't even care.
This guy's like it's midnight and we're debating blind resumes of midfield. What have we done to our lives? What have we done?
I'm going to be up for another 3 hours. Let's keep going.
There you go.
Good for you. Maybe you can launch your own podcast, Joe, and use that Samsung mic I mailed you about 10 years ago that you probably haven't unboxed.
I'm going to be honest with you. I have no idea where that is.
Can you confirm that you received it, Joe? Can you
I
confirm
received it. I used it, and then it disappeared. I do have a klepto child, so.
That actually reminds me of Amish good teams. I received them, I used them, and then they disappeared. It's like good players on the Amish. Like good players on the Amish.
I thought we were going to spend like 20 minutes discussing my failures at drafting.
We're going to have you on again for another segment.
You know what's funny, Joe? Historically, if you look back at your drafts, you do really good in the late rounds, but you keep none of the players.
I know.
It's actually rather funny when you look back at some of the old drafts. Like, yeah, Joe did really good on this. Oh, but then he cut the guy 3 weeks later. It's so much. That was a nice pick that he never held on to.
I was so I listened to the last podcast and I was like, you guys are shitting me. I've done great in my draft. What are you talking about? And then I looked, and yeah, not good.
You know what? I guarantee you your draft record is better than mine. My draft record is horrible.
But you never draft in the top 3 spots.
And there's a reason for that, because the one time I did, I drafted Donovan Tate. So there's a reason why I don't trade for first rounders, because I get them wrong 9 times out of 10.
I mean, listen, if you guys want to, get schooled on first round drafting, just go look at the, 2017 first round draft, or 2018. Then you can get a good scope on how to draft. So I'll leave you with that.
Let's take a look at that.
2018.
2018, all right.
I mean, I can just tell you my first 3 picks. It was.
I'm sure you can, but let's take a look. All right, who did the Bears get? The Bears drafted Luis Robert, who's no longer on your roster, right?
Oh, hey, I'm not saying I own these guys still, but look what I turned them into.
And then Joe Adell, who has never done anything in Major League Baseball, who's also not on your roster. And Keston Hiura, is he on your roster?
No.
So you're 0 for 3. So you're 0 for 3, really. When you look at it, you're really 0 for 3.
All right,
yeah, but those guys are.
I'll go back and I'll show you who I traded for. The traded those guys for.
Okay, so bad trades aside, those are still good draft picks.
Correct.
They are.
You can look at every year of my draft except for one and say, was he drunk? And I wasn't. So there you go. So I'm not drafting next year.
Oh, you know what, guys? In 2018, I actually made a good pick. I picked Jazz Chisholm in the 5th round, who I still own on my team, and that never happens. So that's actually not a bad pick.
No one cares, Mike.
I know. It's a good pick. I don't make good picks very often, so that's a good thing. It never happens.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap this up before I pass out. So, Chris, Joe, thank you guys for coming on, giving up a couple hours of your time. It was a lot of fun, and may not end up being completely accurate by the end of the year, but at least we had some good discussion.
Hey, Scotty, you know what's funny, Scotty? We've been talking for about 9 hours here, and we haven't made championship picks. Quickly, Joe, the championship pick.
Rockets.
Chris?
Rockets.
Oh, God. Scotty, Generals, right? Good.
Generals.
And I'll take the Beers. All right.
Good deal. All right. Thank you, guys. Everyone stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
See you guys.
All right, Mike, there you have it. All the news that's worth knowing about 2021 and what can be expected. Big thanks to Joe and Chris for taking time out of their busy days to join us here on the Inside Podcast. Really good show tonight. Had a lot of fun. I think we learned a few things, and we'll see if these predictions, these projections pan out to be true.
It will certainly be interesting to look back at some of the comments that were made during this program and see how many of them are accurate.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, the next time you hear from us, we'll be up in April, Lord willing. The season will be finally in full swing by then, so kind of have a different complexion with the show. Looking forward to talking about BDL baseball when there's actually baseball being played to talk about. So we will see you then. Good night and good luck to the Generals and no one else.
Good night, gents.